Hey guys, it's Q&A time again. Monday, November 20th, 2017. We did all contest prep questions today. So, and I'll probably keep doing these more topic related ones each week. It's kind of cool. Get some more, let's see, specific questions and stuff. It's normally all over the board, which is okay, but I like these topic related Q&As too. So, oh, and for all the people that like my Metallica shirt, I think it was 2 weeks ago, all you metal guys, I stepped it up this week. We've got a job for a cowboy shirt. Oh yeah, went a lot harder this time. Okie dokie. Let's see what we have here. A little congested too, so stick with me here. What are some of the less than optimal situations you've encountered when a client comes to you asking you to prep them, and how, if at all, did you optimize the situation to get them ready for a smooth prep? Well, I mean, less than optimal. Typical ones would be caloric intake's already too low, they have way too much body fat, or they're already doing a bunch of cardio, or they have some kind of health marker that's out of whack or something. Anything that they're not in a good place to prep. I think I did a video about this, or I made a post about this called "Are You Actually Ready for Prep?" So, I mean, you could search that in the on Facebook, probably find it. But, I mean, those are the typical ones. And normally it just means time. And a lot of the time that it's going to mean, not necessarily letting the clients do the show that they want to do. And that's not really so much bad coaching, or it's really good coaching, because, you want to optimize their starting point before they start the prep. So that might mean building their calories up a little bit more. That might mean slowly backing their cardio off. That might mean taking some time to fix those health markers, whatever they might be. Another one would be, something like an enhanced athlete's already using, a lot of supplementation before they start the prep. Well, that's obviously not optimal either. It's taking time to reset those things. Maybe mentally they're in a really bad spot. There's a lot of things that you could consider less than optimal for sure. I think the biggest thing would be expressing to them how important it is that they start prep in the right spot, because otherwise, prep's obviously going to be less than optimal also. And in which case they might not get the result that they want, or the prep or they might not even be able to do the show that they want to do. Far too often they have this gun to their head approach where they have to do this one show. And a lot of time it's just not the case, because they're, unless they're doing a pro show, they're obligated to do. Outside of that, there's really no show that they have to do. Even someone doing a national level show, they're obviously not going to want to be in a prep that's less than optimal if they're trying to compete for a pro card, or trying to compete at that high of a level. That obviously doesn't make any sense. So just conveying to them how important it is that they're in the optimal state, physically, mentally, all of those things. So, yeah, there's a lot of situations, and most good coaches are going to know that, and you just have to get that message across, which is, unfortunately, might mean you lose a potential client here or there. It happens. It's definitely happened to me, but you're doing the right thing. So on the flip side, have you ever had a stubborn client, or a situation where pushing through the best choice given all options was the best choice given all options? If so, did you make it work? What, if any, were repercussions after the show? Excuse me, guys. Well, in short term, yeah, you can kind of bend the rules a little bit in the short run. If it's less than optimal, might mean calories are getting really low, might mean cardio is getting a little higher than you want, combination of both. things where you can definitely tell their metabolism's downregulated pretty badly. Those things I think in the short run are okay, just because as long as you're patient and have adequate communication through the reverse process, then you're okay. That kind of post-show period might be different than someone that's a little bit healthier. They might be able to have a quicker post-show period. But again, it just depends on the person. The biggest thing here, I think, is that if you know ahead of time as a coach that, hey, there's probably going to be some kind of negatives after this show. There's probably going to be a little bit harder time getting metabolism back to normal. There's probably going to be a little bit harder time getting hormones back to normal. There might be a little extra fat gain, things like that. You need to convey that to the person, let them know, hey, I can get you where you need to be, but you're going to have to be patient after the show. You're going to have to realize that it's going to be kind of a tough post-show transition. You need to stick with me as a coach. You not go off on your own, not take a break. I can give you a break within that to some extent, but going off the deep end, you're not going to recover. You're going to gain a lot of body fat and so on and so forth. But yeah, there's been plenty of clients that situation where I could have maybe pulled the plug in the prep or pushed the show date back, but they knew that I could dig them out of the hole, so they were okay with going outside of what would otherwise maybe be acceptable. But again, you have to let them know, hey, this is what we're going to need to do post-show, and so on and so forth. I hope that answers the question. All right. What are some of the hardest obstacles you encounter when peaking clients? What have you learned learned off first-time competitors and trying to dial in their peak week? The hardest, I don't know that there's a hardest thing necessarily. I'd say some of the hardest stuff's actually some of the things that clients don't think about a lot that are pretty important. Stuff like not sending good pictures, taking pictures all over in different places, not sending the right feedback in the updates, not updating at the right times, etc. So those are things that, as a client, you might not think about a lot, but they're really important. Seeing pictures with someone, like, for example, little things as a coach that you see that as a client you might not think about, like seeing pictures of someone when they get to their hotel and then seeing pictures of them after they have their tan on. It's completely different. The tan might make them look washed out and worse when really we know that's probably not the case, because on stage that tan's going to make them look better. But in their regular lighting, that tan might not look good if they don't have the right lights in their hotel room. So something to think about. There's other little things that are less than optimal, I guess. A lot of the time you can test out, these peaking things. If someone's lean enough, you can test a lot of these things, and it shouldn't be overly difficult, but stress would probably be another one. The biggest thing with these shows is that a lot of the time it gets chaotic, especially if you're at a bigger show or even just an NPC show where there's a lot of people. It gets chaotic. Things might not always go your way. Things might get delayed. Things might go too fast. You might miss something. You absolutely cannot get stressed out, because that's going to have an impact on it too. Someone doesn't, depending on what class you're in, like I find that a lot of the time peaking girls can almost be easier because they don't have weight classes, for one. That's probably the biggest thing. And then some of the guys, they're having to suck down and make a weight. That can be good, that can be bad. It just kind of depends. And that's a call that you have to make coach and client. That can kind of make the peaking situation difficult. There's a lot of things really. Stuff that I've learned. Goodness. Yeah, I would say, I'm trying to think of things like big takeaway points that I've learned. Most of the stuff that I said is probably stuff that I've learned, honestly. Like me conveying that message to the client of how important that those updates are and how important that feedback is and how important the stress reduction is. I've learned that definitely try to test the peak as if possible before the show. I mean, that's always helpful. I've learned that I've learned a little bit more about water, about what you can do with water and what you can't do with water. I'd say I've learned a little bit more about that. That's probably one of the main things, honestly. It's like kind of how the whole aldosterone thing works and how timing and stuff like that. I'd say that's probably a big one. All right, let's see. Best way to drop water without diuretics. Okay, so with that, obviously being lean, that's number one. You're probably not going to hold a ton of water that way. Not that you can't hold water, you certainly can. And then a lot of the time that's when like electrolytes are off, too many carbs or something, water shifts from inside the muscle to under the skin. Best way really is just, it's a timing thing. Like kind of like I said on the last question, it's more of a timing thing because some people say you can't cut water. Some people say you can cut water. Both can work. To say that you can't cut water is ridiculous though, because you absolutely can. Plenty of people I've cut water on worked great, but it's like I said, it depends on the time. You start tapering water or cutting water, 2 days out, something like that, you're probably gonna have problems. There will be aldosterone taking place, anti-diuretic hormone, things like that, where you are gonna hold water, obviously. So I would say that a good rule of thumb, and this is going to kind of vary depending on how big the person and how much water they're actually going to have in their body. Good rule of thumb is I really don't like to go more than 12, 14, 15, 16 hours maybe without water before prejudging. I mean, that seems to be pretty good. Like I said, again, depending on how big the person is, how much space they have to hold water inside the cell. You could maybe get away with 24 hours on certain people if they're super hydrated, but it's probably a stretch. Again, size of the person matters a ton in this case. But super hydrate during the week. I know most people do that. They water load or whatever you want to call it throughout the week. Get to that super hydration point where you're excreting, excess water, obviously. If you're going to cut it, don't cut it too soon. Cut it 7, 8 o'clock the night before, something like that. And then you maybe want to rehydrate a little bit after prejudging in the morning. But yeah, that's it. I mean, that's a super simple way to do it. Is just hydrate, cut it, but not too early. If you want to cut it at all, that is. Approach to carb loading without spilling over. Oh goodness, that's a super difficult question because this goes back to the testing thing. I would say that in most cases, if someone's completely depleted, they're probably going to be able to handle. Let's assume that they're at their most depleted point before they carb load for the show, before they load. Maybe they're using carbs and fats, maybe just carbs or whatever. You could get away with probably a little bit more than what their typical refeeds are. Look at a refeed. If they're lean enough by 2 week out mark or whatever, put the refeed at a place where carb wise where you think they're going to be pretty full. Then look at them. If they are pretty full, then you might know, hey, for the actual show load, we might be able to do another 100 carbs and they're there. Or maybe they even spilled a little on their refeeds, so we don't need to do as much on their load. For a lot of people, if it's a class you want to be really conditioned in, which is a lot of the classes, you might lean towards 75% full and pretty dry. If you're worried about spilling over, that is. I mean, you don't want to go like 25% full. Obviously, they're just going to be flat looking. But you can, like I said, use those refeeds as a gauge. You can also do things like glucometer. Look at, is their blood sugar getting too high in between meals? They're 3 meals in on their carb load, and their blood glucose before the next meal is 120. Yeah, it's getting a little high. You're getting over 100, 110. It's going to get a little higher just because you're eating carbs all day. But you're getting over the 110 mark, 120 maybe. Probably going to start spilling pretty soon. So you might want to back it off. You might want to switch over to fats, or you might want to just hold off on eating. If they're not super hungry, just hold off on eating for a little bit until that kind of settles back down. Look at them. Do they look better? Maybe, because maybe they have pulled the partition some of those nutrients. Maybe they pulled them into the muscle and now they look a little bit better. So that would be another thing, using the glucometer. Outside of that, it's really hard to say unless I have like a specific person in front of me and I've worked with them. But I mean, those are some good general things. Okay. Methods to track fat loss progress and results in addition to using the scale. All right. I mean, some simple things, measurements. If you have somebody that they have a hard time with the scale, maybe they just really hate the scale, or their weight trends are really funky. They fluctuate a lot. They don't lose weight very quickly, but seem to lose body fat, type of thing. Using measurements is good. And then the obvious one would be pictures. But in those fluctuating people, that's obviously a little bit skewed at times as well. So you'd want to use as many methods as you could. And deciding which ones is going to kind of depend on the person. Some people lose a little bit more linear fashion. So the scale's pretty accurate as long as they're not looking like they're just losing muscle. The scale might be pretty accurate. You might want to use those other methods on certain people. But in general, I would say have at least probably 2 things that you can use per person to gauge whether or not they're progressing. With pictures, one thing I like to do is side-by-sides, because sometimes when they get really lean in a prep, it's a lot easier to see. It's a lot easier to see those subtle changes week to week. Or even every few days, because they're lean. Every little bit of that separation is going to show. But if they're not quite there in prep yet, side by sides are good. You can look back a week, 2 weeks, whatever, see what they look like. Look at the big fatty areas. It's their love handles or their midsection or whatever. Have those fatty pockets shrunk up? And if they have, and you see they're smaller in that area, then there you go. They're definitely progressing. And then as they get leaner, it's easier to use those pictures for more accurate assessment. And if they're really lean, the pictures are super easy to use because every single little bit shows. So I hope that's helpful. Okay. If a client stayed keto all throughout the prep with success until 2 weeks out, would you use a carb-based peak week, i.e. rapid backload or front load, or would it be best to stay keto, use a fat load? Oh, excuse me. Okay. That's a good question. I would say that in general, most people that are using ketogenic approach in prep are doing some kind of refeeding usually. Maybe they're not, but if they are, then yeah, you could use carbs to load, because going back to the refeed thing, I mean, you would already know the reaction to that. If they went straight keto the whole time let's say if they've been in keto for the last 12 weeks, they haven't had any carbs at all, it could be risky to load heavily on carbs at that point. If I'm going to do it, I might do a little bit of a front load at the beginning of the week. Not a lot, but a little bit. See how they look, and then load, intramuscular triglycerides. Get those full later in the week. I know that they're already fat adapted. So I know that they have the enzyme production. Their metabolic process is already geared towards fat. So I might I might be sticking to the safe side of things and just loading a little bit more fat. Now, I've had success using carbs with people that are on keto for a few weeks or 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, even 8, 10, 12 weeks if they've had carb refeeds. So keep that in mind. I mean, because there's enzymatic processes and metabolic processes and stuff that determine what your fuel source is. And a lot of people, yeah, I mean, our body's made to be able to shift back and forth, but if you're very fat adapted, it might not be as smooth of a transition as you think. So if it's, like, again, been a long time on straight keto, if you do want to use carbs, I would say probably just to be safe, maybe do them a week out, beginning of the last week, not a lot. Do it, earlier in the week as a small front load. See how you look. If it's good, then yeah, you just coast for a few days and then rapid backload at the end of the week. If it's not good, then go back to fats. All right, a couple more here. Oh crap. Okay. When a client is having digestive issues near the end of prep, what do you suggest doing to help? And then they elaborated with, just seems like I stopped processing food in general and was blocked up, which made it difficult to make weight. This could be a couple things. I know stress, just systemic stress on the body, not necessarily like, oh, I'm stressed because of XYZ, but systemic stress on the body because of the actual prep, being low body fat, all the things that you're doing, that in and of itself can be hard on digestion. Food volume gets really low. So obviously you don't have as much to pass. It might be hard to form a good stool because you just don't have as much to bulk form that and pass it. Fiber intake might get low. People don't watch, if they don't watch their fiber pretty religiously, they might realize, hey, my fiber intake's like 10 grams right now because I'm only eating, whatever amount of calories, small amount. And you don't need as much fiber if you are eating lower calories. You don't. But at the same time, you don't want to let it get ridiculously low, so you might have to supplement. Going back to the stress thing, I mean, gut flora can get thrown off, so good probiotic products can help. Obviously, you're probably not changing your foods a whole lot at that point. So, obviously stick to foods that are going to process well with you. And to be quite honest, if you get to the very, very end and you have a hard time and you are getting blocked up, food volume's low, you know that you're getting fiber and you know you're hydrated, you know your stress is under control as it can be, then you might need something extra to help the process. I mean, a lot of people use things like super dieters tea, even things like suppositories and stuff like that. If it comes down to it and you're, final week and you need to use some super dieters tea, which is mainly senna, I think it's senna leaf based, which is a laxative. So if you need to use that for a few days, then do it. It's, a cup of it at night, make yourself a cup at night, and then you should, have a bowel the next morning, hopefully. Do that for a few days, make sure everything's cleared out. Same with suppository, day of, if you really can't go, get it all cleared out. Food's going to come back in before too long, and you're going to go again. So it can just be, like I said, a food volume problem. But those are some suggestions. Without knowing, like I said, those are some suggestions without knowing, like, everything you're eating, exactly what's going on in your life and all that. Last one. What exactly is a drying out process? I just don't get this. So drying out as in, I guess it's kind of a tricky word because you're not really, with drying out, you're just looking drier. You're not actually losing a ton of body water because you just want that water in the right place. So when we go back to the super hydration thing, when you're hydrating all week, you're really hydrated, your muscle cells are completely hydrated, everything's good. Any excess is being flushed out. Your kidneys are working great. Everything's working on overtime because you're drinking all that water, and then you cut it. Let's say you cut it. You're going to be plenty hydrated to keep going to the bathroom, keep passing, keep passing, keep passing. Even by the morning, you shouldn't be super dehydrated. You shouldn't have dark urine by the morning, really. Maybe a little bit more, but it should still be semi-clear, maybe, little, have some yellow in it maybe. But if you're hydrated enough, then what's going to happen is a lot of that's going to be pulled in because you're eating carbohydrates or whatever you're eating, food, whatever you're eating. Get a lot of that pulled into the muscle cell, and then you dry out. I guess that's the drying out. That's the look that you're going for. But again, like I said earlier, too long of cutting the water. You can't just, drying out is not just like, oh, I don't drink water as long as I possibly can. I go without water for however long. That's not going to make you look the driest. Yeah, you're dry because you're literally dehydrated. But a lot of people that step on stage that are super, super dry looking, they might not be as dehydrated as you actually think, like as a whole in their body. Now, if I have someone that they get that, they have that look and prejudging, they look pretty good, things are as dry as I want them, and then after prejudging, rehydrate, because I know, hey, if I keep holding water off, they're not going to be looking like this. Again, they're going to go flat and look like crap by the night show. So I have them rehydrate a little bit, whether that's like 16 to 32 ounces maybe at most, depending on the person. Maybe check their urine again, see how they look after they drink the water. They fill back out a little bit. And then they should be good. If they're hydrated enough at that point, they can hold the water until the night, look pretty solid. But I mean, I've had people drink water all the way through too, so it's not to say that you can't. But yeah, that's drying out, I guess, in a nutshell. And that is it. 27 minutes. All right, guys. That's it for me today. I hope those were helpful. Like I said, the more specific you guys can be with the questions, the better I can answer them. The more vague they are, the harder they are to answer. But these are pretty good, so thank you, and I'll see you guys next week.